Hey everybody, it's Tony George from DocSports.com, and that guy sitting to my right is my new media partner. Y'all know him, y'all love him, from Houston, Texas, and all points in between, Mr. Sean Salisbury. How you doing, Sean?
Tony, doing great, man. Good to be on with you today.
Well, we're glad that we could join forces with you here a little bit and get your experts' insight into all things sports. And people will know you obviously for your prowess in the NFL and even college football. NFL quarterback, a winning Canadian Football League quarterback with the Grey Cup as well with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and of course, all points in between. But you cover all sports, and of course, Sean, you've been busy down in the Houston area on Sports Talk 790 down there. You got your own show down there, and it was just nice to have you on board here. We're going to kind of mix the Sean raw and unfiltered and mainstream takes in with some of the gambling takes. I think that's going to be it's going to be a fun mix for everybody to get your insight.
I can't wait, man. I love it. It's time we mix both these days. I mean, with the way things are rolling, it won't be time before we walk upstairs at a basketball game and punch in a number, and there you go. And I can't wait. It's great to be a part of this. I love this side of it, but I also like the analyst side. So when we combine them both with your gambling expertise, we got ourselves a good run here, brother. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Sean Salisbury's story and myself go back to 1996. As a matter of fact, December 30th, 1996, I was a Cub reporter for ESPN 1480 in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I went down to the Orange Bowl with my wife and my brother-in-law and his wife, and was reporting remotely back to Lincoln. Nebraska was playing Tennessee and Peyton Manning in the Orange Bowl, potentially for the national title. There was another big game that year, and that was Washington State and Ryan Leaf taking on Michigan in the Rose Bowl. And I went over to Fountain Blue Hotel with my buddy and walked in there not knowing it was Tennessee's home hotel, and walked into the bar area to watch the Rose Bowl, and it was packed. And some guy tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Did I see you earlier in the ESPN tent?" I said, "Yeah." He said, and he had turned around. It was Sean Salisbury. He goes, "Well, me and Mike Adamle got two open seats at our table. Why don't you sit down?" And when there was no place to sit, Sean Salisbury gave me a place to go watch the ball game. That's how I first got to know you.
Yeah, I remember it well. And that was the irony of that. It was my first that year, Tony. I'd been doing sidelines because I had quit playing the summer, like the spring, summer of that year in the NFL after 10 years. And ESPN had called and asked if I wanted to do college football. I said, sure, I'd love to. And so they sent me out, and to make a long story short, to do sidelines. And I was doing one day a week, and then I started doing the Saturday and then mix in Thursday games with Mike Tirico and Todd Blackledge. Well, as the game and the season went on with the studio, with the split national title game, and throughout that week, Herb Street and Fowler and Corso were out west, right? I think they were doing it at the Rose Bowl, all their shows. And so they were going to come in a day or so before the national title game because they were at different times. So that week, Mike Adamle, the great Mike Adamle, what a great first-time studio teacher I had. And we were covering the whole week for ESPN, doing hits and stuff for that game, the Tennessee and Nebraska game. And I'll never forget, it was my first week-long studio because I've been doing sidelines all year. So I was actually really nervous and didn't know what was going to happen. And that stuff led to our next year. We started NFL Tonight a month and a half later, and I got hired to do NFL Tonight and college football, which turned into NFL Live, which still is on now, The Daily Show. But I'll never forget being out there and Mike and I doing it. And I was like, oh, my gosh, I can't believe I'm at a national title game, and I've only been doing this for 4 or 5 months. So I remember that well. I remember the Fountain Blue. I remember that day and inviting you to the table. And we've known each other and been friends and acquaintances and ever since. And it seems like it's gone really fast. But that was a great start to a fun career. And I remember that day vividly. And I'm grateful not only to you for joining us, but Mike Adamle and ESPN for a great start to which was a fun run with a great place and a great company. And that was a fun weekend and a fun week leading up to that with this split national title opportunity.
Yeah, it was. And fast forward to 2000 and around 2011, I'm down in Houston interviewing for a radio gig, and I was in this conference room right off the lobby there in Houston with Gal Media, and I'm standing there talking to this guy named David Gal who ran this place, and I'm trying to pitch my ability to do a radio show and talk about gambling. And the elevator door opens up, and Sean Salisbury walks off the elevator in the lobby and leans his head. He goes, "Tony, what are you doing here?" And Gal goes, "You know this guy?" And Salisbury goes, "Yeah, I know him." He goes, "Well, I'm thinking about auditioning." And Salisbury goes, "My show starts in 20 minutes. We'll just put him on the air." And that, so I went in.
Here we are, bingo.
Yeah. And I walked out
Great
there, and he
live
goes to me,
audition. And
yeah.
look at you. You're still killing it. You'd have been killing it with or without me. So I think it's awesome, brother. The memories, and they're vivid as could be. And like I said, here we are in 2021 doing this together.
Yeah.
So we've had a couple different decades, brother. It's been nice.
Yeah. Say, listen, I'm just going to stick with that theme, and this is off script here. We really don't have a script because it's Sean and Tony unscripted. That's what it's going to be 3 days a week, folks, right here on this YouTube channel. But at the end of the day here, you did witness that Tennessee-Nebraska game in the Orange Bowl. Little did we know at the time that was Tom Osborne's last game. And little did we know, as we look forward now all these years, that the starting quarterback, Scott Frost, in that game would be the head coach of Nebraska. And I wondered what your assessment was. What do you think he's done so far up there? And I'm a Husker alumni, but don't be afraid to hurt my feelings, because right now I'm a little bit unsatisfied as an alumni.
I understand. And I remember, too, it was odd being able to talk to Coach Osborne coming off the field, doing, being a part of that broadcast and trying to get some stuff for SportsCenter and some cuts. And I remember I fell to love Scott Frost's game throughout that run, Tony, because of, he was a different brand of quarterback. He wasn't a pure passer, but he was tough. Kind of like the game has transformed. It used to be if you were a dual threat guy, you couldn't throw, you were just a runner, right? But there was a sense of toughness about him as a player, as a quarterback, as kind of a dual threat guy that was run first, pass second. But there was a toughness about him, and you always knew that. And then he went to the NFL and switched positions. I think he played strong safety for a minute and free safety in the NFL, but just a tough SOB. And then him going on throughout his career and then making the transformation to coaching, it did not surprise me when he did it, because there was something about him that was a no-nonsense player, and he carried that over to coaching and did a great job, obviously, in Florida before Central Florida, before he got the job at Nebraska. It takes time, and I just wish I'd like to go back. I wish Nebraska was back in the Big 12 and we could go back. They seem to belong more there, Tony. That's my assessment, and I love Big Red. I've been to that stadium a couple times, and it's still such a great place to go. But they've got to get better. The deal is that everybody in the Big Ten is physical for the most part, and I don't think Scott, now it's time you start to implement your players. Mike Riley, my coach at the Grey Cup, was the coach before Scott, and I loved Mike too. Listen, Mike didn't forget how to coach, and Scott doesn't forget how to coach, but you're dealing with the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Penn States, and while it's not an excuse, recruiting's a big part of that, expanding the base. See, with Scott, and I don't mean this disrespectful to him, but where he knew he wasn't going to get the Florida State guy, and at times they did. But it was they turned 3-stars into big-time players. The development, and I think Scott Frost can do that. They did a great job of developing players there. The key is at Nebraska, while you're not going to win the recruiting battle against Ohio State or Southern Cal or LSU, or depending on who you're getting on the national scope, and a lot of times if you're recruiting guys from that part of the country, in Minnesota and Nebraska and Michigan, to steal one, or a former, somebody who has Nebraska ties, you got to do overtime. Because I talked to Steve Sarkeesian earlier today about Texas and about the recruiting base. He goes from Alabama, but it's not exactly like he's missing out on a hotbed, right? I mean, he gets a hotbed coming into Texas, and then to spread it nationally. I think for Nebraska, they've got to be able to go into Florida, come to Southern California, once in a while a JUCO guy, and the junior college in Texas, and grab one of those guys that may go somewhere else. And if they start to win, then they'll get back into it. But when they're in the Big 12, it just seemed like it was a better recruiting opportunity for them. Scott's got his work cut out for him. I think he's a really good coach, Tony. I do. But this is Power 5, Big 10 football. Scott knows that. And Nebraska fans will become impatient, whether you're a former player there or not. It's all about winning. Scott knows that. But the recruiting battle, because I think if he gets the right player, he'll develop him. But then COVID steps in, and it's just been a tough start. But I'm not ready to quit on Scott Frost. Yes, underwhelming so far. But I still think Scott can coach. But you're running in. I mean, the competition's a little different than it was used to in his previous conference, and he knows this.
Yeah, I was impressed. He went in and beat up Auburn in that bowl game that year
That's
and
right.
remained undefeated. And we were all wanting him in Lincoln. And now, the natives get restless, but it's never going to be the 90s again unless you're Alabama. And speaking of that, you mentioned Steve Sarkeesian. I know you had your show. I'm sure that podcast, that show is taped and available online.
Right. It is.
Where can folks find that real quick?
That's sports790.com.
Okay.
Sports790.com. And just click on my show, and the Sarkeesian interview will be on there. He said some really interesting things about overcoming adversity. Tony, he went through his tough times. And
Right.
I was fascinated. Hopefully you get a listen. And I loved it. Here's why I think he can be successful. Well, hanging around Nick Saban doesn't hurt. You learn a lot of things. How he was
Yeah.
talking about when he was first coming up and a hotshot head coach and coordinator and head coach, that it really came pretty easy to him. And he was more about what is it doing for me as opposed to what can I do for them. And he said, it's the
Right.
last 5 years. He said, I've been a better coach the last 5 years after going through what I went through, coming out of it on the other side and immersing himself into caring more about others than him. And he also made a great point about coaching. We were talking about offensive philosophy. And he said, we've got to start to guard against and realize that some of these players aren't Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, where they're just a pocket guy and they beat you from there. He calls it the stinger. He goes, you don't want to take the stinger away from guys like Mahomes, like Andy Reid's done, because they're so instinctual. And we were talking about Tua and what kind of NFL guy he'd be. And I really found it interesting because I train quarterbacks all over the country, and I've known Sark a lot of years, but I think his ability, one, to be multiple and change offensively scheme-wise according to his talent, but to not try to change players and force them. And we get so many coaches or some that want to say, it's either my way or no way. And there's no flexibility. And I
Right.
think that the flexibility at Texas and going to recruit, and they haven't developed players. I think Steve Sarkeesian, watching Nick Saban, seeing Pete Carroll, having gone through success and some failures as a coach and in his personal life, I think Steve Sarkeesian is going to be really good, and he knows how to recruit. If he can keep the guys in state, he's going to be fine. But you're getting one of the best play callers in the country, and he will call the plays for Texas. I'm anxious to see its alumni. But he's also had a taste of this at SC, where alumni have expectations, as you mentioned at Nebraska, and
Right.
and the things he's going to bring to the table. They don't want to wait 5 years. If they wait 5 years and they're not winning or developing, they'll find a new coach. Sark knows that, but he loves the challenge. And I think his adversity that he's gone through, and now the success and what he's done with different types of players, Tua 1 year, Mac Jones the other, and his ability to be flexible without, changing the way he goes about his business on the rules side of it. And I think Steve Sarkeesian is going to have success, and I think they've been waiting for a guy like this. But you got to win, and you got to beat Oklahoma if you're going to stay. If you're going to stay the head coach of University of Texas, you got to be in the Final Four talk right off the bat.
Yeah, I think the difference between him and like a guy like Scott Frost coming in there is, and no offense, I know you're fond of Mike Riley. I wasn't so fond of him at the time. The cupboards were bare when Frost got there. Sarkeesian,
Right.
he's got some talent to start with right now, and obviously Oklahoma's got a stud quarterback coming back that was a freshman this year that took him a while to get going. They're going to be tough. Oklahoma State's always tough. A lot of these programs, are established, but the one thing that Texas has is they have facilities. They have a great school. Austin is a great place to go to school and live in and be a student in. They have some of the best facilities in the Big 12, which is always a recruiting tool. But on top of that, they've got some talent coming back, and they're going to be, he's going to be a top 4 in the league preseason right out of the gate. Yep. The world is open to him. He's got a lot of speed and talent. That's one thing. Texas has always had talent, Scott.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And here's the thing too about it, Tony, is Sark recognizes the pressure but relishes it, because Nick Saban puts pressure and he coaches his coaches, and it'll be important for him to coach his coaches. And another thing Texas has, the resources and the money. Not just recruit, they got money. They can pay their assistants. He's had a guy that's his offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, that has been with him for 5 years from Atlanta to here. And experience, you got 2 places to go when you've been through success and failure. You can either say, this is the way I'm going to do it and be stubborn, or, he's not going to have the same type of offensive personnel right off the bat that he had at Alabama. But he doesn't have to. He's got to recruit and go get him. and get those guys. And he made it. And I loved what he also said about competitiveness. He goes, I learned from Pete Carroll that we are going to learn to compete. If you don't want to, he said, if you're not going to want to compete, Texas probably isn't the place for you. And so I'm anxious to see, Tony, how that works out. And I they've gone through from Charlie Strong, who's a good football coach, and Tom Herman, who's a good football coach, but they haven't been able to get him. 9 wins is not enough at Texas, and it never will be. It's not enough at Nebraska for you guys. It's not enough at Southern Cal. It's not enough at Florida. It's not enough at LSU or Alabama. It's not enough at Clemson now. This is Texas. So that's what you deal with. And finishing 28th in the country gets coaches fired. Losing to Oklahoma, winning 9 games. I believe Steve Sarkeesian is going to come out smoking. The key is smoking's one thing. Pretty offense is fine, but physicality and winning football games. And he's been used to winning the last couple of years at Alabama. This will be fun for him, and I think fun for Texas fans.
Yes, it will be. I'm real interested to see how that pans out. We're going to switch gears, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Sean Salisbury. He is our new media partner. Sean and I are going to be doing 3 shows a week over there right here on this YouTube channel. And I'll probably give Sean a text or two about a game or two I like against the Las Vegas line. And we're going to kind of blend the two. And I know Sean's been doing a little side work with some Las Vegas line stuff. And so we thought we'd get him in here with the big dogs here, kind of pissing the tall wheat with the big dogs over at Doc Sports.
You guys are the Alabama, right? There you go.
Yeah,
that's right.
We are. Been around 50-some years. And, Amari Mosman, who founded Doc Sports, is an absolute maverick and legend in our industry. And his son, Wade, runs the company now, who you've visited with on the phone many times. And we're all business. We're all about transparency. We're all about telling it the way it is. And we're all about user experience. And I think the user experience and having someone of Sean Salisbury's caliber to blend into our website with our team of experts. I might not be the only one that been interviewed Sean from the website, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a winning combination. And one thing, everybody associates you with the NFL, football, the ESPN, but visiting with you over the years, visiting with you recently about this very opportunity, you and I had numerous occasions to discuss your prowess in other things. I know you're a passionate college basketball fan and your knowledge, and obviously running a drive time sports show in Houston, one of the largest markets in the country. You have to know your stuff, so to speak, in everything. I'm curious to know your thoughts, sticking with the Houston market, about the Houston Rockets. Surprising defeat last night. They'll put up 119 and let Washington have 131. And obviously they've got some issues injury-wise right now. But, last year, big splash, James Harden's, Westbrook, 2 of the biggest stars on the team leave. They bring in Oladipo. You take a look at this team on paper, Sean, and you scratch your head why they're bringing up last in the Southwest Division right now, because, you got John Wall, Eric Gordon, Oladipo, Tate Tucker, Cousins. I mean, Christian Wood is unbelievable. Your thoughts about the transition with the new coach, and what do you think? What do you think the trajectory of this team is right now?
The question is, as we push closer to deadline, are they going to be a buyer or seller? And Tony, this team, I actually, when they're all on the court, now that's a big if and when Christian Wood's back and healthy, and who knows when, day to day, when Oladipo's on the court, and when John Wall, when they're out there together. PJ Tucker, 240 or 50 plus games, finally missed. The guy's a warrior and a battler. When they're out there and they went through their winning streak before this losing streak, it was like, it's going to take a minute. First of all, Steven Silas is doing stuff different. This is no longer stand around and watch James Harden play ISO basketball, and you stand in the corner, he drives and kicks or finishes and shoots. I think that one thing I do know, even though through this losing streak, this team has more peace, and I think there's more joy playing. Now, joy better constitute wins, or you're going to get criticized. Now, they're 6 in a row lost. This team, if they can get healthy, listen, they can. Christian Wood is going to be a star in this league if he already isn't. He may be the best player nobody talks about enough outside this market. Guy's a double-double every night, and he's a 25 and 10 guy. He's a stud. This guy can play. And 3 years ago, nobody knew his name. Nobody knew him, right? NBA
Right.
circles, and he's carved himself out. Steven Silas has a great poise, but accountability that I love. Listen, whenever you lose James Harden, who wanted out, then you obviously lose a lot of scoring and a star. But there also comes a point in time at diminishing returns where if the guy doesn't want to be here, you got to move on. I think this team's happier. Whether they're better or not remains to be seen because James didn't close out a title for him. Just getting
Right.
there isn't good enough. So are they buyers or sellers? Do you get into the Blake Griffin market when Detroit runs him out and the contract situation where they just, instead of trading him, they just move him on? Do you get into the situation of getting rid of PJ Tucker? What about Victor Oladipo? Do you keep him and pass him through? Or do you say, okay, we still got a shot at this if we get everybody healthy? We can get a 6 or 7 seed and make a run when we're healthy. That's what you're going to have to ask yourself. They've got a ton of assets as they got through a lot of these trades from Westbrook and and in the past, and moving on James Harden. They got a truckload of assets from the in the James Harden movement. So the question is, this is a team that when Wood's out there and they're playing and they're running the court and energetic, the key is they've got their whole thing depends on defensive energy, man. It just does. And health.
Yeah.
And if you don't have defensive energy, you give up 131 points to Washington, you're in trouble. Right, you just are. You shouldn't lose to them, but it's been very few games this year where everybody's been available.
Right.
And so we can't keep saying this, though. You're 30 games in, then you're 40 games in, and you're at the midway point. So I like this team. I actually, when they made these deals and watched them play, when they finally got going and won 5 or 6 in a row, I was like, this is going to be fun to watch. The key is their health. If they're healthy, they're dangerous. If they're not healthy, and you got to decide where you may be in a seller's market. If you're in a buyer's market, then we'll see who they move. And if they move a guy like Oladipo, or if John Wall, somebody jumps in, then we'll know. But I do think, Tony, moving forward, it had to happen with James Harden. They're better off. James, they're going to score a lot of points in Brooklyn. But I'm having more fun watching this team when they're all on the floor. But this 6-game losing streak's hard to watch because whenever you give up 131 points, you're going to have a hard time winning. But Steven Silas is going to do well here. He feels like a guy who's had a head coaching job before, been in the league a long time. I think players respond to him, and there's an accountability factor here that wasn't part of it in the last couple of years. There is accountability here now.
I see that. That's one thing I was going to bring up. You hit my buzzword there, so you stole my thunder. But the one thing I think the foundation of this team is being built on right now is defense. You take a look at them overall in the NBA. They're 9th overall. They're 7th in field goal percentage allowed and 7th in three-point percentage allowed in the NBA. The problem is 23rd ranked in points, 26th in field goals, 27th in three-pointers. But that being said, you've had Wood and Oladipo out. You have not had full strength on offense to see what your potential is. But this coach is good enough to say, okay, we're not going to put up 125 a night right now, so we got to hold opponents down. And yes, last night was an anomaly, giving up. And trust me, Washington could put up 131 on anybody in the NBA. They have the potential.
Yeah, Beal and Westbrook, yes.
Yeah, they can't stop Grandma with a shopping cart at Costco defensively. The Wizards can, but the thing of it is, the Rockets can. But fatigue comes into play when you're thin on the bench and you don't have any offensive firepower. You wear down, especially on the road. We've all been there in sports, whether it's football, anything. So that's a little bit of the excuse there. But I think Washington has a lot. I think that the Houston Rockets, for those of you paying attention on the futures market, and for them to surge against the spread wise, so to speak, down the road here, covering some numbers, is I think there's a hell of a lot more upside with this team than there is downside with the Houston Rockets. Yeah. And speaking of upside, we'll just stick to basketball locally now. Calvin Sampson's got himself a hell of a basketball team down there at the Houston Cougars. As a matter of fact, they have probably you hear about Virginia, although Virginia last night didn't show any defense at all against Florida State, who, by the way, had played one game in the month of February. So let's quit talking about Virginia's defense in college basketball. And let's talk about the Houston Cougars a minute. They are second, allowing 54 points a game. They're allowing 36% from the floor, Sean, defensively for their opponents. This is a good basketball team Obviously, I think they're going to win this, the American Athletic Conference, but I think this has a potential defensively, this basketball team, to be an Elite Eight basketball team. Your thoughts?
Agreed. And if they can, if the scoring, what are they averaging, Tony? About 77 points a game.
Yeah.
That they are dangerous come turn. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
this.
nobody
I
wants them.
said about a year. Yes, I said yeah. You might want to bypass Houston because I can promise you a couple things. They'll be physical. Kelvin Sampson will have them playing defense regardless. There'll be no pouting going on with the Houston Cougars if you're not scoring. Their philosophy will be we gave up. We only scored 60. You're only getting 56. That's a way.
Right.
Kelvin and I have been pretty close. I mean, I consider him a friend and a cohort and somebody that I spend time picking his brain. And he's also been a pretty good mentor for me on some stuff away from basketball and away from football or sports. I'm a huge fan. I said about a year and a half ago, Tony, I made it loud and clear on the air. And we've had some good coaches and stuff in this town. I said he's the best coach, and I put him up against anybody in Texas at the time. Now, Rick Carlisle does a great job. We got a lot of good coaches. Don't misunderstand me. And maybe some would say that's hyperbolic, but I'm telling you, this guy last year when they had lost and played kept his team afloat. Now he's got a little more veteran with mix of youth and Grimes and Sasser. They can score, but the key is their effort and energy and oxygen on defense, man. I'm telling you. Yeah. And, I think they're only giving up like 24, 25% shooting beyond the arc. So this team can defend and extend. They're long enough to compete, and they're getting about 40 rebounds a night. So they're really, really good. I love this team. Matter of fact, I'd be hard-pressed not to pick them getting to the Elite Eight. And if you decide to blink in a tournament game, he's got moxie, toughness. He empowers his players. He doesn't micro-coach them. I'm a diehard Kelvin Sampson fan. I'm just shocked that, and no disrespect to University of Houston, but what he's done, that others aren't coming in trying to steal Kelvin away, and I'm sure they have been. NBA, hell, there was talk that he was going to be the Rockets head coach. A lot of people wanted him to be. Yeah. Well, Tillman Fertitta, who's on the one of the big regents here and also owns the Rockets, I think he kind of liked him with the Cougars too. I hold Kelvin Sampson in the highest regard and a good man. This is a dangerous team. The truth is, if it's not for a couple slip-ups, they're not sitting in the 8th-ranked team in the country. We're talking about a possible 1 seed, if not for a handful of, and it only takes a couple to drop that seed. But you know what? If they're a 2 or a 3 seed, you better look out. You better strap it on because they are dangerous. They can score and they defend. And when you're only giving up 56 points a game, you can be in every game in college basketball.
Yeah, that's one thing when we're looking at the NCAA tournament, folks. When you get a team like Houston that is undervalued, and you're hearing it from a guy who knows the head coach, knows the conference, knows the school. One thing you'll find with a 3 or 4 seed, for whatever reason, they should be at least a 3, if not a 2. But you get them a higher seed, they get in some middle of the pack games against schools like Providence or Kansas this year, or one of these big name Power 5 schools. I will guarantee you right now, the Houston Cougars will kick their ass. And if they're catching points, you're gonna be in good shape. Quickly,
you might make yourself, Tony. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just gonna say you might make yourself some good money riding some of this Houston Cougar stuff because they will be ready, and they will be. I mean, and don't worry about battle tested. Defensive teams are always battle tested because they don't take they don't take trips up and down the floor off. So they're always battle tested regardless. And the AAC plays some decent basketball. Trust me. And you know this, Tony. I'm going to tell you, I can't wait to see what their draw is in the NCAA tournament. And Kelvin Sampson, huge fan. He'll coach them up. I promise you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Salisbury is joining us here on Tony's Time. I'm going to have something fun here. Sean and I have discussed a couple of names for the show, but just for craps and giggles, in the comments section, leave us a comment on what you think the name of this show should be, and we will consider those as we move forward with Sean. Sean and I are going to be doing 3 shows a week together, and come Thursday and Friday, we're going to be talking games against the point spread. But today, just a little bit of an introductory show and Sean's thoughts locally. And I guess before I let you go, Sean, one more thing. What in the hell is going on with the Houston's football team? The Houston Texans, you know what? You know this. You won a Grey Cup as a quarterback in Canada. You won big games at USC. You won big games and played almost 10 years in the NFL. You know all these NFL teams, many of the owners, many of the coaches. You know you can't win in the NFL without a quarterback. I don't give a rat's ass what you got on defense. I don't care. Maybe Trent Dilfer is the exception to the rule, but other than that, you need star talent at quarterback, a franchise style quarterback, and they are sitting there with one of the best quarterbacks in the league, bar none, right up there with Patrick Mahomes. The kid out of San Diego's looking good. Josh Allen
Herbert,
out of
yep.
Buffalo. Herbert, Allen out of Buffalo, but Deshaun Watson is in that conversation. He is in that narrative. And for one reason or another, new coach now, management, what the hell's going on down there?
Well, first, and you know this, Tony, all the success or failure starts with trust in sports, in life, in relationships.
Yeah.
They've just the reason Deshaun wants out, and I don't blame him. And when people say, "Well, you signed a contract, shut up and go play," and like you're supposed to be happy just because you have money. There's a lot of miserable millionaires. Okay, there just are.
Yeah.
Although it's easier to pay bills, you could still be miserable.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm on Deshaun's side because if it happens once where you mess up, it's one thing. But when it's a trend in the organization, the Jack Easterby, he has his ear. Knives in people's back, it appears, not literally but figuratively. Cal McNair, as an owner, not really making a decision. They don't have football guys in the right spot. Trust is a big issue here, and dysfunction. When I say that the Texans are the most dysfunctional franchise in the NFL, Tony, that's saying something considering some of the franchises we've had, and they are. There's some that are dysfunctional on personnel. There's some that are dysfunctional on who they hire, or maybe the draft picks that they've given away. But I'm talking about dysfunction not only on 4-12 season, which is even more remarkable, this kind of performance Deshaun put on, but the dysfunction of trust, and nobody and people in the building are like, ugh, I don't want a part of that. So listen, general managers, coaches, owners, you and me, you spend your lifetime in this business looking for that guy, meaning Deshaun Watson. And I would argue, Tony, you named some great names, but over the next decade, if I was choosing today, it's Patrick Mahomes over the next decade building a team. Watson second, the second biggest, the best asset in this league over the next decade. Now, I can make an argument for Herbert and Allen or Kyler Murray. But Watson, if he was on Kansas City this year, not that he's better than Mahomes. I'd take Mahomes slightly, but if he's a 9-9, then Watson's a 9-7. And they would have Super Bowl still with Watson as the quarterback. They would have. So this is a phenomenal human being, phenomenal player. I understand people, well, you're getting paid. You signed the contract. Yeah, but still, marriages are happy 3 months ago. 3 months later, they're unhappy. It happens. Trust goes away, and then getting it back's hard to do. So I feel bad for David Culley because he's inheriting a team that he doesn't know if he's going to have his quarterback, and they're 4-12. I feel bad for Nick Caserio because he's almost got to be kind of a yes man to Jack Easterby, who doesn't have much football background, yet seems to have the ear of Cal McNair in making decisions. So the dysfunction continues. People's heads will explode if Deshaun Watson is traded. I'm anxious to see where the line in the sand is. I wouldn't trade you. If you're going to trade Deshaun Watson, the team you get to trade that trades for him, they're going to have to feel it hard, Tony, a major gut punch to where they trade for Deshaun Watson to be like, oh, man, do we really want to give up that many assets, number ones, to get, even though Watson's great? It's got to hurt that franchise. So I wouldn't do it. I'd probably play hardball, but I understand why Watson is. And if I was him, I'd do the same thing. Why waste a career? It's not wasting a career. He didn't say anything about the personnel. He's talking about the trust above, it starts at the top. So how do you expect players to trust each other if the front office doesn't trust each other? And it seems like everybody that comes in, somebody's pushing them out and got somebody's ear. And it seems to be a cultish. It does, Tony. And that's the word that's used a lot around here, a cultish following. And I don't know if they can fix it. But right now on paper, without Watson, this team's picking first or second in the 2022 draft. And they don't have a first-round pick this year. I would advise them to exhaust every option they can to keep number 4 here. If you lose him, then a whole bunch of people's job ought to go with him because that would be a major mistake. But it's trust and dysfunction why Deshaun is unhappy here, not because his teammates.
Let me ask you a question. If I was to give you 30-1 odds that J.J. Watt lands in Pittsburgh with his 2 brothers, would you take him?
Yeah. The question is, does J.J. Watt, his brother would be great. The question is, does JJ think that Pittsburgh's closer to a Super Bowl than Tampa or Kansas City? I actually think that the Rams are going to come into play. You know, I think that when his career's over, he's going to be doing the acting or, you know, get into all that stuff. I think Kansas City gives him a great chance to win. Brady would give him a great chance. Pittsburgh as well, but the question is, where are they? I think while JJ in Green Bay, because he's from Wisconsin, but for a small chunk of change, I would take that. I would make that bet too. Okay, so you were saying, well, look at the odds of winning it to losing it. His brothers, there's a good chance he'll be there. But I actually think the decision is going to come down to I got 3 years of good football left. I can go to a team who's given me the best chance to get the one thing he doesn't have, a Super Bowl ring and some peace now as far as an organization. Because when J.J. Watt wants out of something, you know there's dysfunction because there's no better dude in the league, in the community, or as a teammate. Right. Tony, if I got 30, I don't know what those odds are, but I'd probably take that. But I'd even lean towards maybe a Kansas City or somebody like that even more, just because I think they're closer to winning the ring. And the question is, will he even stay in the division like with the Tennessee and go back and pay back his team twice a year? I don't know, but he's going to have a good spot. He may not be the J.J. Watt 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, but he will help a football team big time. And like I said, he's a difference maker in the community as well. I wish him well. And that's just another reason why the fans here are bummed out that they didn't even get an asset for him. Wouldn't you have tried to trade him? At least tried to trade him to Pittsburgh and say, let's see if somebody will give us a 5th-round pick. But again, the front office, it doesn't go, let's just do him a favor and go. Hell, I'm all about doing favors, but I'd sure like to get a player in return. That would have been a nice thing to do.
Well, you know, you need to. I was shocked to see that just from a business standpoint. So, man, they're thinking caps on there behind closed doors there, but nonetheless, and as a huge Kansas City fan, I'd love to see him land in KC.
Yeah, you know, I bet you would.
Man, big time. Oh, holy crap. Well, ladies and gentlemen, his name is Sean Salisbury. He is our new media partner here with Doc Sports, and we're going to be back Thursday and Friday this week. We're going to be talking points. We're going to be talking games, Sean's insight, and some edges on the point spreads, and get Sean's perspective as well as mine, and we'll try to win you some money. Click the link in the description below in this and get over to Doc's website and check out all the wares, get a free $60. And Sean will be retweeting this on all his social media stuff as well. We'll get y'all hooked up, and be sure and tune in every week for the insights. And Sean, welcome aboard, and I appreciate you putting up with a kind of an old amateur hack like me for a half hour.
My man, you know I love you, and we've known each other a long time. I'm excited. This is a fun way to start, and we'll have fun. And I'm anxious to see how you're going to sit in on this, how you're going to sit the gambling way with Anthony Davis with the injury to his Achilles and what it means for the Lakers, not only future, but currently on those betting lines, among other things, as we roll into baseball right around the corner and this NC2A tournament. I'm looking forward to it. It's great to be partnered with you, and it's great to be a part of this, brother. You know I always respect and appreciate your insight.
Appreciate it, Sean. Folks, tune in on Thursday right here on Doc Sports YouTube channel. We'll be up again with Sean Salisbury.